Welcome back. This is Jared with It's Not Aliens. We are going to have a great show today with Brad Olsen, author of 10 books, including 3 in his Esoteric Series, Modern Esoteric, Future Esoteric, and Beyond Esoteric just came out. Award-winning author, publisher, speaker. He will also be doing a convention. He is coming up in Las Vegas, March 19th to the 21st. It'll be in Las Vegas. It's 5devents.com. It'll be a great time for those that haven't been able to get out to a convention this year. They are happening. They are starting. And I would like to welcome Brad Olsen right now. How are you doing?
Hey, Jared. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show. It's nice to have this face-to-face talk. I know we met briefly a few times at conferences, but haven't had an in-depth conversation till now, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's so funny to go from the person. I think a lot of people, I think, underappreciate when they come to these conferences now. It's so much more impressive that people are interested in the truth. They're interested in discovery. They're interested in self-experimentation in a way like never before, because it's not like they were taught in school. So to be able to see you, or to just even participate, like I was the guy doing the research and participating as a not. I've been interested in all the subjects, whether it's movement, paleo, gene expression. I'm a follower of the Wim Hof practices. You know, I met Wim Hof. The very first conference he did was in San Fran on Treasure Island. I was there with about 100-something people with Wim as he's swearing
Wow.
up and down the aisles. It was hilarious. I mean, conscious control of our immune system, controlling our heat and our cooling system so that we can either stay cool in the heat. He had just done 50 miles in the desert, or the reactivation, I think, with the amount of people on the planet and consciously where we are. I think it's an exciting time because more people through these kind of conversations where it's not, things are limited on a television show. You can only get so far. And there are lots of official interviews with some radio stations, but again, it's either too many interruptions or, it's what you can do. But here, these podcasts and conferences that people can go to now, these are the chances I think people have now to really start indulging that search, whether it's gray state or whether it's aliens or whether it's that consciousness. There are so many different avenues now that are exposing, I don't know what I think now is a burnt house of cards that is now in cinders. What do we say? I mean, what got you into doing any of this to begin with?
Well, it's been a long journey for me. I've been in book publishing for 25 years, started out as a travel writer, been going on junkets and backpacking around the world. Now I've been to all 7 continents. So I definitely have a world perspective as it then ties into these esoteric subjects, which I write about in my new series of books, including Beyond Esoteric, Escaping Prison Planet, which has just come out. It's doing very well out of the gates. And it is all the mysteries of the world, really. It's what has been withheld from humanity, and it is what I find to be the most interesting field of research and study that I can get into. And I would say that my readers and people that I interview with also find these subjects so very interesting, because we are in the Great Awakening. We are in this phase where people are really starting to understand this new reality and basically the control grid that is making an attempt to keep us in that control. But people are breaking out, people are waking up, and while the Great Reset might be very great for the global elite,
Yeah.
the Great Awakening is going to be the counter to that, the antidote.
Yeah.
So, and that's all esoteric subjects. That's just information that's known by a select few. But this is opening up on a daily basis. More and more people are beginning to understand it. As you said in your introduction, even things like the Wim Hof practice, even things like understanding our true immune system abilities. These are ways that we can counter this control grid, which makes us think that we're so vulnerable to viruses, and if we don't get the vaccine, we're all susceptible. And that's not true. If viruses were such a killer, the human race would have been gone a long, long time ago. So we
Yeah.
have innate abilities to fight this, and that information has been greatly suppressed. So that's why I have a chapter in my new book, Beyond Esoteric, about the bioterrain, about how it's our inner systems and our immune system, which can also protect us if we do the right things, eating well, exercising, and being in a positive state of mind. Because we know that if you're in a fear state or angry all the time, that you're not going to be able to operate as well as somebody who is in a happier state or in a love state. And that the body actually responds to that. So I'm glad you mentioned Wim Hof, because I've been doing his breathing exercise too and having a wonderful response in my body
Yeah.
to that as well.
Well, okay. So I was already rock climbing. I was already doing the paleo thing. And a friend of mine had a spinal condition, and he's like, "Have you ever heard of Wim Hof?" And I'm like, "I have no idea who you're talking about." And so I looked it up, and that conference that he was hosting was literally 10 days later. So I went out with 3 friends. So he's on Treasure Island in San Fran. And there I am. I went from 0 to 2 days before the conference, which I knew we were going to get in ice water. I had never done the breathing technique, but we end up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. We weren't far from Nevada City, and which for some people who don't know, it is the birthplace of the gold rush, and it's gorgeous. It's in California, and I was in this 30-degree. I mean, because it's running, it's colder than freezing, but the water's running. So we got in, and I'm like, well, this is really cold, but I hadn't done the breathing technique, which is bringing me to the question. First time I ever do the breathing technique, I'm doing it with 130 people with Wim Hof walking up and down. Uh, you know, I don't think I can repeat everything he said, but he's like, anyway, we're doing it. And I remember the first time I exhale, and we don't breathe for 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes, 35 seconds, something like that. And the sensations that started coming over me, one, not having tried the breathing technique, we're sitting in a group, and now I can go, I don't know about you, and it's not about the length of time, but I can exhale and I can go 5 minutes without breathing. Sometimes I don't try. It's still like that whole thing. You don't force it. And then, but the sensations I try to describe to people, you're the first person I've talked to that probably understands. I try to explain it to people that it's a switch. It's like, you don't have to think about, I've done yoga, and it's like, okay, whatever your problems are at the door, leave them at the door and let them float away. And I'm like, I'm still wanting to murder the dude that cut me off like 1 minute ago on the freeway on the way to yoga. I'm not letting my problems go. But with Wim Hof, you don't think about what's it like when you start doing the breathing technique for you? Because it's not like you don't have to think about it. It's like you start doing it, it's happening. I feel like you can feel and control things within your body. There's sensations. It's somebody tried to tell me, oh, you're over oxygenating. I'm like, no, that's not it. I'm not
I don't
breathing
know
in a
if there is
bag.
such a thing as over oxygenating,
Right?
because we
So,
need the oxygen to support our life system. But
right.
when I do it, I'm usually up at hot springs. I like to do it there and do it in the hot and cold pool.
Oh, wow. That's
And
so cool.
and I find, and you probably experience this too, that when doing the breathing in a cold pool, the cold just goes away. You don't
Yeah.
feel it as you
Yeah.
did when you first step in.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. And let's just go back to the yogis of India and many esoteric practices of ancient religions. Most Eastern religions talk about breathing, talk about the breath, and how important that very much is. So this is kind of a new thing for people here in the West to think about the breath. And then Wim Hof, being from Holland, he's European, but just the Superman who's broke all kinds of records and hiked up Mount Everest without oxygen tanks, just going to show that we have, and I have chapters in my esoteric books about superhuman abilities and highlighting how we all really have these innate abilities that just haven't been properly worked out, that we just haven't gone to the length of educating ourselves and mandating it through government to learn these things to make us so much better than we are. But now
Yeah.
it's coming out, and these are esoteric subjects, to be sure.
Yeah, I do like, one of the things I love about Wim Hof is, and it's more of the representation of, we have this secret system that only secret men learn in a secret temple in a secret place, and that's how we've been doing it for 2 or 3,000 years. Okay,
Right.
that's helped everyone. And Wim Hof, not knowing Wim, and meeting him, it feels like you've known him forever. But in meeting him, people are like, because he speaks like 5 languages or more, and he's traveled the world trying to figure it out too, just like you. He talked about how he traveled around trying to figure it all out. And he's standing up he's not even on stage. He's just walking up and down the aisles with us. And he goes, effing demystify, only he doesn't say effing. He's like, effing demystify, effing demystify. You want an effing prayer? Throws his hands together like this. And he goes, here's an effing prayer. Rattles something off in Hindi. And he goes, there's your effing prayer. And he goes, effing demystify. You can do this. Your kids can do this. I can do this. We can all do this. And it's because we've forgotten we can do this. And he just would go on and on about effing demystify. And I think that it's great that we're finally going Eastern and Western, because I bring up Johnny Chong and the whole, again, the Qigong and those electromagnetic currents, and Qigong manifests differently for different people, but there's scientific papers behind it describing that it could be nuclear cold fusion happening at the mitochondrial level, but we just don't know. But the point is, there's this divide between the East and the West where we don't cross the 2 boundaries. And as Westerners, we're terrible. Everything started with Fertile Crescent or the Garden of Eden out of Africa. Oh, and some things happened in Asia, but whatever. And then now the problem with our post-Younger Dryas last 6,000 year world is that we have people just identical on the East who are like, well, I call it banging on the blinky board. You bang on the blinky board, it gets an orange light on the left, it gets a red light on the right, and then someone walks up 1,000 years later and says, I know you guys have been doing this ritual for 1,000 years, but it looks like you're banging on a 747 motherboard. That's the captain's pilot. That's a plane. And they're like, heretic. And they're getting a reaction out of the science, like you said, like in your books and what I've written about it. The issue is we're getting a reaction from a very advanced technology, but it's not the only thing. That's the problem with these secret societies or anything else, where it's like, you've picked up one little piece of the puzzle, you ritualized it or hoarded it, didn't share it. It took people like Wim Hof. It took people like us writing things. It's shifting that narrative and that paradigm where you're not exposed, because for 3,000 years, just a few privileged monks are doing a methodology that could help everyone. It's not like they're out there. It's not like there's a Job Corps or a Peace Corps teaching the way. There's not a bunch of new esoteric Vera coaches running around yet. Or is it you? Is it us?
You're a coach, a tall guy, white skin.
Yeah, just walking around,
gray beard.
Yeah. So I just think it's exciting that we're actually looking at this again, but also I want to encourage people, especially with all the work you've done. It's important for people to read what you've written, but then hear what we're saying, and that go out and self-experiment. Try it yourself. What's it like when you go from a hot or cold to a hot? What's it like doing the breathe? I've never done that. How's the breathing technique in a hot pool?
Again, it eliminates the burning sensation, where you just start to become equilibrium with the heat as you do with the cold.
No way.
So it's quite an experiment, and you'll only know it when you start to do it. That's the wonderful thing about the Wim Hof technique. You only realize the power of breath and the power of the mind when you make that devotion to doing it, and doing it from the belly, the deep breathing, cycling through, oxygenating the brain and the body.
Yeah.
And then, as you said, you have the ability to hold your breath for many minutes without even really trying.
Yeah.
It just starts to affect the body in a really wonderful way.
Yeah. Did you, I guess, I know that you're in a snow-capped area. Are you going to be taking advantage of this and doing it while you're there?
You bet I am.
Yeah. What else? Okay. So I've done a little work on Edwin Checkley, the Georgie Bear. consider the father parkour and the movement culture with Erwin LaCour and like Ido Portal and all that. But what were some of the other, I do mention, I try not to forget, I've never met him, I've never tried it, but the breathology technique, the Stig Severinsen, the guy who did break one of he's broken a few of Wim's records, but the issue is same thing, breath, breathology. He's also considered one of those superhumans. Do you mention him or what else, not specifically person, but what other, I know I just hot second Qigong, but are there other techniques that you've tried or you've looked into that are interesting to you?
Yeah, and we're just talking about breath being just one of many of what I call superhuman abilities. They're not really so superhuman when you become a Wim Hof, when you start to adapt
Yeah.
it, and it becomes quite second nature. I
Yep.
love the book Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. I read that book when I was in India, and every chapter is about a yogi that has some incredible human ability, spanning the range from the yogi who can astral travel to the other who has the power of telekinesis that can affect matter, bend a spoon like Uri Geller, to telepathy and being able to communicate by thought. These seems very exotic or foreign ideas to us, but in reality, as it is explained by Paramahansa Yogananda, they're just innate abilities within each one of us. So all we
Yeah.
have to do is train the mind and the body and the spirit to accept and adapt to these abilities, much like flexing a muscle. You
Yep.
go to the gym every day and you work out and you keep at it and you feed your body well, you're going to have the body you want. And
Yep.
it's very much the same thing with these superhuman abilities. If you start training yourself and working towards, say, with a significant other, with your partner, there are telepathic techniques you can do, such as staring
Yeah.
into the person's eyes for a while. And after you come out of it, you make some plans to think about certain things, compare notes. I'll tell you, it's quite amazing how similar those thoughts can be with no spoken word. So we're just on the precipice
Yep.
of learning and understanding a lot of this stuff. That's again why it's esoteric, why it's only known by a select few, but so many people are starting to wake up to this and incorporate it in their lives and use it and then know it's real. And that's what it's all about, is when you start to interpersonalize these abilities and use them yourself, start to, for example, meeting someone on the first contact and really not having much to say, and how many times you'll just either grok with that person immediately, or maybe there's a little tension and that could have something to do with a past life or other things that may have affected you both adversely. So it's just knowing and understanding that these abilities are available, and just like a muscle, working them out and getting them stronger and stronger by exercising your ability to use them.
Yeah. There's positive brain entrainment, the entrainment between two people in a conversation, like you said, the eye contact. I mean, this is even mainstream science. I mean, if you talk to someone long enough, make the eye contact, there's brain entrainment happening. We take it for granted that it's, oh, that's interesting. No. There is built-in, hardwired, very advanced abilities. And we're at 10 to 15% consciousness. I frequently describe it as, imagine a computer in safe mode. It just is getting the basics done, or again, you're banging on the blinky board and we're getting a reaction, there's something happening. But then we have the opposite problem where, again, you can practice yoga for 1,000 years on the old Chernobyl site, but it's still Chernobyl. It's a dead nuclear reactor. But you don't need to wear a headdress and celebrate the summer solstice. It's Chernobyl. But the problem is we have thousands of years of recent human history, which is great and very important. I think people have discounted. One of the things I like to bring up is that collective human consciousness. I'm curious your opinion on it, but I won't load you. I'll just tell you what I think first, which is I think that like Leonardo da Vinci, 500 million people on the planet, maybe is the theory. But the idea was, well, he could think of a corkscrew that could fly, and he thought of very brilliant things. But his work on the human body was amazing because he had it in front of him and he was open to it and he looked at it. But now we have people coming up with graphene conductors and spintronics and quantum computing. And I don't think that's just a matter of a few people knowing some things or just reverse engineering some ancient advanced human technology or outer worldly. The issue is we have 8 billion bits of collective human RAM on the planet. So on one hand, I find it incredibly dangerous that people discount the value of either native peoples or people who appear to be doing nothing but, oh, they're not doing anything. They're just starving and they live in the desert and they're not worth anything. Or you've heard certain people we can't talk about say we could